Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of DeLoreanTECH, and today I am going to walk you through the process of replacing one of the compressor hoses to the AC system. In this case, it's the high pressure side hose that I've replaced, and it ruptured while I was driving. It was really hot and I was running the AC, and I had just had my system recharged with 134A, which I don't recommend doing if you're still using the original R12 components in your air conditioning system. I would recommend if you're not going to use R12, I'd recommend using RED TEK. That's what I have in the system now, and it's working awesome. I've had no problems whatsoever. There's a bunch of issues using 134A with the system. I'm not going to go into detail about that right now. But I will say that using DeLorean Go's two-piece compressor hose kit is really the way to go for the car, because the two hoses, you got your low side and your high side hoses. They run from the compressor to the front of the vehicle. The high side hose runs all the way to the front of the vehicle to the condenser that sits just in front of the radiator. Okay, and the original factory hose is a one-piece hose. So you've got a fitting on one end here and a fitting on the other end at the condenser, and just a really long hose in between. And the issue in replacing the hose is that it runs through a channel that sits between the body and the frame, and it's too difficult to fish a replacement hose through there. You can't actually get it through there because these fittings are, so the fitting here that connects the high side of the compressor is like an elbow shaped fitting. There's no way to get that through either side. And on the other end, you've got a similar situation with the connection at the condenser. You've got another elbow shaped fitting that can't fit through that channel. So I don't know what the engineers were thinking back then when they designed the car. The only way, according to the workshop manual, to replace the compressor hose is to actually separate the body of the car from the frame slightly, just to be able to access that little channel that the hose is running through. Okay, and that channel is shared with the clutch cable. So you've got your AC hose running through there, and you got your clutch cable running through there. DeLorean Go has solved that issue with their two-piece kit, which you don't need to separate the body from the frame. What you do is, once you remove your old hose, you start here at the compressor, attach your high side fitting here, and it's a two-piece set. So you've got a short hose. This is the short hose right here, and it basically ends at the location just above the air deflector plate underneath the car, with a fitting. The other hose, which is a longer hose, you'll route that starting at the condenser and route that this way through the channel, and then you'll meet the end of the short hose and then connect those two together. So it's really the way to go, the only way to go, separating the body from the frame. I've looked through the process. It's a really complicated and, I believe, unnecessary process to have to go through just to replace the compressor hoses. But in case you need to, I honestly recommend the DeLorean Go two-piece hoses for both the low and the high, because with the low side you have a similar situation. The low side hose runs down here and it goes on the other side of the car to the other channel that runs between the body and the frame up to the front of the car. And this hose is actually has a larger diameter than the high pressure hose, so that one would be, again, a challenge to run through there. Fortunately, that channel isn't shared with another hose or another cable like the high side is. So anyway, I'm going to walk you through the installation process that I did. There was all sorts of different issues that I had to tackle, but I was able to get it. So we'll go ahead and get started with the video. Okay, so we're going to start our hose replacement here in the engine compartment. we're going to be replacing the high side hose, and here's the rupture right at the compressor itself, and we're going to be removing that hose. First thing you want to do is take a 14mm wrench and remove the hose clamp plate. There's a 14mm bolt holding it together, both the low side and the high pressure side connections. Before you want to do this, you want to make sure that your AC system is completely depressurized and completely evacuated. So that was done here. System is not under pressure. Just go ahead and remove the bolt and the plate together. Just go ahead and set that aside for now. And now you can just detach the high pressure side fitting from the compressor. And just kind of leave that there for now. Here's a better look at the rupture. It ruptured from the inside out. It was an overpressure on a really old hose. I believe these are the original hoses. Here's the new hose from DeLorean Go. It's a two-piece hose, part number 100748. It is their two-piece high side hose. And here is the first part of the hose that runs from the compressor. And the longer section of the hose runs to the condenser. And this connection here is where you're going to join the two hoses together just above the air deflector shield. So those two connect together, and everything comes complete. So you get a new valve cap, and there's also a Schrader valve already installed in there. So everything's complete and ready to be installed. You are going to need a 27mm and a 22mm wrench at the condenser. Okay, so here we are under the car, and here's the air deflector shield. You're going to want to locate the high side hose, which runs along with the clutch cable, and it's running through this cavity that's between the frame and the body of the car. Okay, so it's running all the way to the front of the car, all the way to the condenser. And you might have some zip ties that are connecting or holding the hose and the clutch cable together. You're going to want to separate those. Here we are underneath the car, and just locating where the compressor hose is running. You want to make sure you remember the route that this hose is taking, because when you install the new hose, you want to make sure you install it in the exact same location. You might want to take some photos just to be able to remember where it was routed. And here we are, just kind of taking a look at the hose where it's mounted. That's the fuel filter right there. So it's running right above the fuel filter. And you'll also notice there's like this protective sleeve that's over it. So here we are under the car, and we are going to be cutting the zip ties in order to separate that clutch cable from the compressor hose. So be very careful not to damage the clutch cable while you're doing this. It may or may not be easy depending on where those zip ties are located. So they could be located anywhere along the channel where this is routed through. And I think in this installation there was one zip tie that was pretty hard to reach, but I was able to get it. And here's one more. Sometimes you might need to use scissors. It depends on the angle that you have to cut. So you're going to want to unbolt the air deflector shield, the air deflector plate that's underneath the car. You've got a 10mm socket that you can use to unfasten the nuts, holding it in place. You don't actually have to remove the plate, you can just disconnect it and let it sit down a little bit. You just need to be able to access the area within, because that's where you're going to make your connection between the two hoses. So the short hose and the long hose will be connected in this location right here. So it offers some protection to the fittings that are in there. As you can see, there's the old hose, the existing hose running through there right now. We're going to be running the new hose through there. So what you want to do is you want to start at the compressor, and we're going to be placing the new hose. I'm going to be routing that down alongside the old hose just to help with the routing of it. You want to make sure it's routed in the same location, so you just push that through, and then all you got to do right now is just sort of place the high side fitting next to the compressor. We're not going to be installing it right now, we're just going to place it there and then go underneath the vehicle. Let's go ahead and place it there. And here we are back underneath the vehicle near the fuel filter, and you've got the old hose. We're going to need to move the old hose out of the way, and you've got your new hose also running down there as well. So just pull the old hose down and then take your new hose and replace that where the old hose used to be. So it's kind of up behind that, the other hose, the low pressure hose, right above the fuel filter, and you're going to want to put that protective sleeve back on as well. So here we are, just making sure that it's being routed in the correct location. You might need to move some of there's some wiring in there that has to be moved around a little bit. You just want to make sure it's in the exact same location that it was before. And here we are. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm just reusing the old sleeve that was there. That's a protective sleeve, and it basically sits right behind or right on top of where the fuel filter is. Protects the hose from any damage or any chafing that might happen. And so here we are underneath the air deflector plate again, and we're just basically pulling the old hose through that. It's very easy to do. So now we have the old hose out of the way completely. We still have it within the channel, but now we can run the new hose to the location just above the air deflector plate. So again, you need to make sure it's routed through the correct location. There's a hole in the frame that you're going to want to route it through, like a little tunnel in there. So route it through. That's where the original hose was. You'll route the new hose through that. And there you have it. And back in the engine compartment, we are going to now put the fitting on the compressor, and we are going to basically just hand tighten the compressor hose clamp on there. You don't have to tighten it up right away. We just want to make sure it doesn't get loose and fall down in the engine compartment. So here we are back above the air deflector plate, and here's the end of the shorter hose. And you want to make sure that you leave the little caps on there to protect the hose end. What we need to do now is we're going to be removing the old hose, installing the new hose through that channel. And here we are. This is the old hose at the condenser location in the front of the car. So this is right in front of the driver's side front suspension. And there you see the connection to the condenser. This part is probably the most challenging part of the installation. Okay, and here's the connection to the condenser. Now that's a 22 millimeter nut and a 27 millimeter integral nut. Okay, so there's a hose nut that's 22 millimeters and a 27 millimeter integral nut that you're going to have to hold in place while you loosen the hose nut. So what I've done is I cut the hose at that location there, and I took my 27 millimeter combination wrench, and basically what I did is I ran the box end or the ring end of the wrench. I looped that through the hose, and I pulled that all the way up to the condenser location where the hose is connected, in order to, and you're doing this in order to hold the 27 millimeter integral nut in place. That one doesn't move. You just want to hold that in there, because if you don't, you're going to damage your condenser. So here we are, carefully placing the 27 millimeter box end over the integral nut. And here I am just taking a wrench, and I'm going to loosen that 22 millimeter hose nut. You can use a combination wrench, or you can use this adjustable wrench, whatever it takes. It was very tight in this location, but I was able to get the hose nut loosened. Just got to be very careful, and you'll notice the 27 millimeter wrench is there holding that integral nut in place. If you don't do this, you will twist that integral nut off. So here we are. I've removed the hose nut. And that's the integral nut right there. You're going to want to take note of the route that the hose is going through, just to make sure you again need to route the new hose through the same location as the old hose. So we're going to start routing the new hose from the condenser towards the rear of the vehicle. So you're going to want to make your connection to the condenser, and kind of do a similar process. You're going to want to get that 27 millimeter wrench again to hold the integral nut in place, and then use a wrench to tighten the hose nut. So the integral nut has a male thread, and the hose nut has a female thread. So just sort of hand tighten that at first, just to get it in there. You're going to make sure that it seats correctly. Again, you want to loop the box end of the combination wrench over the hose so you can get to that integral nut and hold that in place. So this is going to be for tightening the hose nut on a new hose. So here we are, just finished tightening up that hose nut. And just a note, when you're making these connections, you don't want to use Teflon tape. So don't use Teflon tape. I do recommend applying a little bit of ester oil on the threads, but you don't want to use Teflon tape. Those don't seal. These hoses are sealed by O-rings and not the threads. So here's the old hose. This is behind the front driver's side wheel. We're gonna remove the old hose from this channel. So you want to start running your new hose through the exact same location, just behind the front suspension right there. Again, you might want to take some before photos so that you remember exactly where the hose is being routed. It's very critical that it goes in the exact same location as before. So what I did here is I actually taped the new hose to the end of the old hose so I can fish it through that channel. Made it a lot easier to do it this way. So here we are, we're going to fish the new hose through the channel. It was actually really easy to do, didn't have any problems. You just need to make sure that you don't kind of dislocate that clutch cable in there. You want to make sure that that's in the same position as well. You don't want to move that. So here we are, we've fished the new compressor hose through the channel. We've removed the old hose. Here we are removing the last of the old hose. And here we are. At this point, there's the opening's a little easier to work with. This is closer to the air deflector plate. So you want to run the end of the long hose through there and route that just above the air deflector plate. Again, you're going to want to come back, and after everything's installed and tested, you're going to want to come back and zip tie everything back up just like it was before. That way these hoses don't move around. So everything looks good. And here we are, making sure that everything is nice and perfectly installed in there. You want to make sure you're not pinching anything. Here we are with some zip ties. The one-handed zip tie. And you don't want to tighten them up all the way just yet. You just want to leave them there so you're ready to go once you're finalized here. So here are the two connections you make in the area just above the air deflector plate. So you just remove your caps. I did a test fit before the install to make sure that there weren't any issues with the threads, and I did apply a little bit of some ester oil on there. So here I am, I'm just hand tightening the hose nut for now, and then go back in and tighten the hose nut there. So there's the completed connection. Now we want to come back and tighten up the compressor hose clamp. This time I'm using a 14mm socket to do that. And that takes care of the installation. Not too... Okay, so that was the video. I hope you guys found it somewhat informative. I did want to add a couple more things. After you've replaced the hose and before you recharge your system, you're going to want to add some refrigerant oil to the high pressure side hose. Since it is brand new, you're going to want to add a little bit of ester oil. I recommend ester oil for the DeLorean. It works for all the different refrigerant types. So you've got R12, 134A, and RED TEK, which is what I'm using right now. I don't recommend using mineral oil That is designed mainly for our 12. I don't recommend using this stuff, PAG oil. This is really specifically for 134A. But ester oil, you can't go wrong using ester oil no matter what you're using in the car for your refrigerant. So when you add the oil to the system, and the way I did it was before I recharged the system, I disconnected the high pressure hose. I put a funnel into the inlet side of the fitting, and I ran the compressor with the low pressure side connected, and that just kind of drew in the oil as it was circulating air through the system. It drew in the oil. I think I added about 4 ounces of oil in there. Then before recharging the system, I evacuated the system. I pulled a vacuum on the system and did the recharge with the RED TEK. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that. I think I made a video of myself adding the ester oil to the system after I replaced the hose, and I can probably post that at a later date. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.